Such a tragic story, a 6-year-old in Pretoria. Lots of questions coming up in our mind. We're discussing it before we went on air with you, Veka. It's just like, it just boggles the mind. You know, what kind of a person, so to speak, would do that to a child? And we just wanted to start there. I mean, where do you begin?
Well, certainly, Dan, I think that this particular situation has captured the horror of the country because it has been in such a public space and in the public eye. But every single rape of a child is a horror story, and something that we as South Africans have to come together to understand how we can stop this terrible tragedy of sexual and other violence happening against our children on a daily basis, if you look within the context of the crime stats.
Well, I suppose, Lynne, the question is, how do you stop it? I mean, why can't I take my child out for a milkshake and a burger? Why can't somebody go to hospital and have their baby and not be raped the very next day? Where is that safe place?
And I think that this is the reality that we are facing and that parents have to take cognizance of, is that actually we do need to keep our vigilance over our children almost on a 24/7 basis, and it becomes a very unnatural way of life. The children don't have the freedom to play and to be themselves.
Children, you said keep vigilance. In this particular case, if we just have reports, is that the 6-year-old was playing in the play area that most restaurants now have
for childminders.
For childminders, and then she ended up in a toilet by herself without the childminder and without the mother, who was also apparently in the restaurant. So who failed the child?
Well, I think that the responsibility has to lie squarely with the perpetrator. That nobody anticipates that in a safe, enclosed area that a child would be taken into the men's room and treated so abominably. And unfortunately, it's kind of almost a call to South Africans that we need to be more hyper-vigilant and more aware. But certainly, the perpetrator has to take full responsibility. And I think that as the information around this case evolves, that it might, shed some light in terms of what is happening in our society. Because I understand that there were drugs involved in terms of the perpetrator. That I read that somewhere, I don't know for sure. I would imagine that this was a person that was himself traumatized. I think one of the difficulties that we as South Africans face is that it's not a very well-known fact that up to 40% of our children, girls and boys, are sexually violated at some time during their life, according to the Optimus study. And we know that boys are very reluctant to come forward and to talk about the sexual violence that they've experienced. Girls are as well, but there seems to be a greater kind of call to girls to come forward. And what will happen with those young boys that have been sexually violated without receiving counselling services is that they tend to hold a lot of anger and a lot of aggression within them, and there's a higher chance that they themselves may go on, not necessarily, may go on to perpetrate acts of sexual violence. And so we as a country need to grapple with how do we engage with our children, be able to first of all try and prevent any forms of violence, but particularly sexual violence against boys and girls. How do we strengthen our communities, engage with our families, and if that has happened, to look at how do we provide healing services for those children and families.
And that brings us to the question of this little girl, Lynne. I mean, is she damaged for life? Can she recover from this? How do you even begin to treat a little girl who's been through this? And I mean, just looking at the descriptions and what was found in the bathroom, I mean, this kind of trauma goes so deep.
It does go so deep, and it's certainly something that she is very unlikely to forget ever. So that I think with counselling, and counselling services can never take the experiences away. We can just help her to understand that and to integrate it in a manner that enables her to continue with her life without carrying the scars and the post-traumatic stress symptoms that will come as a result of this. But it stays with you for life.
For the whole family, yeah.
Exactly.
For the entire family.
And she's 6, according to reports, and then you have a 17-year-old, a teenager, who's just given birth in a hospital as well. I guess the sense of trauma there is, I mean, as you get older, she's more aware of those problems and stuff like that. It's a real battle that we're facing as a society.
Exactly, Dan. And I think, if we see this against the backdrop of the South African 2018 crime stats that have just been released, that, 2.2 million crimes have been committed in the country in the last financial year. And children carry an awareness of these crimes and live in a state of fear and anxiety as to what could potentially happen to them. So Childline's method of engagement is very much to offer a basket of services. So we would go into a community where we would provide counselling services. We would provide class-by-class discussions within primary schools to help children to understand their rights and their responsibilities, in fact, and what to do if they don't feel safe. And then we have community engagements where we engage with teachers, parents, lay people in the community in terms of community events, looking at how we can keep those communities safe. So it's important that we have a basket of services, and that services like Childline are supported to provide counselling and healing services for victims and child perpetrators in some cases.
And one would hope when somebody's caught, like this 21-year-old who's been caught and thing, I mean, despite his background that we don't know, that the criminal justice system will play its part.
It must kick in.
Looking at all sides.
Looking at all sides.
And it must, engage so that to protect other people from
It's horrific,
from that
however
crime.
you look at it. Well, thanks very much for that. That's Gauteng's Childline's Gauteng director, Lynne Cawood, just shedding some light on this incident for us.